Okay.
So where do you want to
The
start?
last time we talked,
Hmm.
we were both kind of in similar positions. We're trying to build products basically that sustain us and we're able to like kind of live our life with on off of. So what's the update for you? Where are you at?
Yeah, so maybe for anybody who is listening to this for the first time, the quick recap is that we have slightly different arrangement professionally, whereas like I think you have a great deal more independence than I do. As far as I know, you're pretty much fully independent. You kind of steer your own ship, so to speak, and like 100% of your time is up to you to decide. Whereas I have a pretty large contract that I'm working on, like in a freelance, like 1099 capacity. So the bulk of my time is devoted to that. That's like my moneymaker. That's how I bring home the bacon for the family. And then the remainder of my time is on side projects like what I'm working on. So just that's some important context for everything that I'm about to say from my personal perspective. So like the main thing that I'm working on right now is bootstrappers.io, which is right now basically just a content curation kind of website, like a Goodreads type of thing, similar to Designer News or Hacker News, but it doesn't have the community interaction functionality built in. It doesn't have like upvoting and commenting and things like that. So it's more just like a very pretty RSS reader. And then what I'm really trying to shift that toward is a curated newsletter that is really like the way I differentiate myself from other players in the space is that I devote a lot of time and energy to manually curating the articles. I read a lot of articles that are out there and pick just the very best or the ones that come from bootstrappers or are written with bootstrappers in mind. And then I handwrite like a summary so that you know whether it's worth clicking through or not. And now I'm starting to layer in some other things like podcast episodes that you should listen to or people that launch bootstrap products that you can go support. So it's kind of evolving in that way. But I've kind of been in maintenance mode with that a little bit, but I did run a test that was basically, I found somebody that was looking to sell their bootstrap product. And I said, hey, look, I have this list of bootstrappers. And, I think at some point, a lot of people have found themselves in the position of like, do I want to build a new thing or do I just want to buy something and see if I can grow it? Which is what I did with bootstrappers.io. I effectively bought a product that came with an audience built in instead of trying to build one from scratch. So I thought this might be interesting. I sent it out to my list and, I generally get maybe a handful of responses every time I send a newsletter, but I sent this specific email out that was literally just all of the statistics about the product, traffic, and what kind of technology it was built on top of, what the monthly expenses as far as running operating costs are, and things like that. And I probably got 36 responses of people that said, this one's not right for me, but I'd love to see more of this. Here's what I'm looking for specifically. Like I'm looking for a software product, this one was another email newsletter. So that to me is the biggest win that I've had since the last time we talked is basically just like, hey, I think I might have hit on something here. And, there are platforms that exist out there that will basically function as marketplaces to buy tiny companies, side projects, and things like that. But almost all of them want you to pay for the privilege, right? They either want you to pay to list your product, they want somebody to pay to have access to see the products, like the acquirers, I guess, so to speak, or they want to facilitate the transaction and take a commission, take a cut of that. I don't really love any of those models, and I'm not really in a mindset where I'm thinking about how to monetize this, but I think there is room in the market for a place that genuinely just wants to pair people who want to part with one of their projects to people who want to acquire an existing project and see if they can grow it and scale it up from there. So yeah, that's just a little bit of momentum that I've seen, and I'm really encouraged by it, and I want to try it out. I have a couple other products in the pipeline that I'm going to be sending out to the list here, but I want to give people the opportunity to opt in because not everybody wants to hear about that, but clearly at least 36 folks do. So I want to just kind of make sure that they opt into receiving more of that kind of stuff.
So is the idea there like just businesses, like looking for businesses that would be like tiny sort of companies that are looking to sell that you could connect with the bootstrappers on your list? That's kind of the idea.
I think so. I think, where my head is at right now with that is, taking the same approach that I've taken to the newsletter, which is like a lot of folks can use a tool like Curated. I think it's curated.co. And it basically gives you like a Chrome extension that if you're on an article, you just hit the Chrome extension, it'll put it into a nice little email newsletter for you. And like, that's an easy way to create a roundup. And it'll just take a snippet from the first paragraph of the article or whatever. But like, to me, the signal to noise ratio on those is out of whack. Like it's a lot of noise. It's too easy to throw 5 articles together and be done for the week. Whereas like I've taken a more intensive manual approach to doing that. I want to do the same thing here. And part of that is, having specific requirements for what qualifies to be sent out to the list, right? Like I don't want to send something that has very little traffic or no mailing list or whatever. Like there's some degree of traction that has to exist. And maybe that is, it has to be earning money. It's not a business if it doesn't earn money, then it doesn't qualify. I don't know what those things are. I don't have them nailed down, but I do know that I'm not looking to pair people up to buy, things that are earning $20,000 a month MRR. Like there are sites that do that very well. FE International comes to mind, Empire Flippers in the e-commerce space.
So you're more looking at like a smaller sort of thing. What would be like the MRR that you would be targeting, like 1,000, 2,000?
Yeah, somewhere. I think I'd probably say, anything under 10K would be considered. But I think when you get into 5 figures MRR, it's like there are probably folks on my list that could afford something like that. But I think the vast majority of them don't have that kind of a budget, especially like if they did, they're already working on something else, right? So they don't need the project. Like they're generating revenue from something else. So I think this is more like high potential, high upside side projects. So like, let's say you already have a software product that you're working on and you have a newsletter on the side that you've monetized with sponsorship ads or whatever, but it's just taking up too much of your time and you want to focus on the software project. Well, You don't want to let that thing just wither away and die. You'd like to get some compensation for it, some kind of an exit, but it's not big enough to go to like a brokerage and try to get, sell for a large sum of money. So why not just hand it off to another bootstrapper?
Right. The thing, so your list, like you mentioned, you send out the articles, and then you don't get like that many responses to that as you did to this other thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
but I wouldn't think that I wouldn't expect a bunch of responses to just a curated list of good reads, right? But most people say, "Hey, thanks for doing this. You're doing a great job." Or like, "I found this article particularly interesting. What do you think about their approach to whatever?" Like something within the article, then that starts like a commentary.
So the call to action in the email, like selling the business or trying to help sell the business, was that just like reply to you if you're interested, or?
I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure this particular individual was fine with me just saying, if you're interested, email the owner. Here's his, like he had a dedicated inbox or something like that, that he was okay with people contacting him at. So yeah, I think that's ideal. Like I don't really want to I don't have the time to be the middleman. And unless like I get to a point where I wanted to charge a fee or a commission or something like that, like I don't really care to own that because there's a lot of back and forth that's going to happen, right? Like, let me see your Google Analytics account. Let me see like proof of revenue or something. And I don't need to be CC'd on all that. Yeah. Not right now.
So it's interesting because like there's these two things now that are kind of playing together, which is like the curation of the links and then the sending out of like alerts for business opportunities. Mm-hmm. From the perspective of like somebody on the list, have you you could send out these like business stuff, but like are you thinking about other ideas for like other alerts, or are you kind of zeroing in on this? Like where are you kind of, I know it was a kind of an experiment, but what's kind of the status of it like right now in terms of the overall product design of this experience at bootstrappers.io for you?
Yeah. So I think, that's a little muddier in my mind, but I think right now the first version of that just becomes a segment of the list, right? It says, hey, if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, click this trigger link. I'll apply a tag in my email marketing software, and only you folks that opt into this will get future updates. And I think most people, if they have any interest at all, will click that link because they just want to passively like have these things coming in. I think the big sticking point for me here is going to be, do I have enough deal flow? Do I have enough products for sale that would qualify and be attractive to make this an ongoing thing? Or is this just something that's going to pop up like, for example, when I sent the first one out, I had one subscriber come back to me and say, hey, I want to sell my thing, and here are the details. And they basically used my email as a template, and they filled it out for their own product. And they said, here you go. You're welcome to share this one. So if I can get that going, if there's sustainable momentum there, then I think about formalizing it. But I think right now, like email is just like lean and, kind of ad hoc. And so I think I'm sticking to that for the time being.
Yeah, I think like that's something that people who are going from a consulting or a full-time job sort of thing, like it's fine to jump around on projects for like ideas and stuff when you're doing like more of the traditional like selling your time sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think like once you make the switch to like a product, it gets a little tougher because like there is like, yeah, it will evolve and it is similar in a lot of ways, but like at the same time, you want to be kind of spending your time on like the thing, right, that you're going to be doing, because like at the end of the day, that's where the like people are going to be getting the value from is like, and like just with, I think with products in general, like the differences there, in terms of how you spend your time, I feel like it's more important. Like with a project, like the project ends. Like if you have a client, that client's project is going to end, right? Mm-hmm. And you're going to move on to something new, a different client project at a certain point. With like you, in terms of like your strategy for Bootstrappers.io, how are you feeling about like jumping to these different things? Like, do you think that like the overall concept for Bootstrappers.io, the thing that people are signing up for the first time, is like strong enough yet? And also like for me, from my perspective, like if I signed up for Bootstrappers.io, I wouldn't want to like opt into something new. Like I just want the thing to just do like, to just kind of like, if these business opportunity alerts are valuable, just send them to me. Like I don't, like at a certain point, I kind of start feeling like there's I like opt-ins for a lot of things. And I think like erring on that side is always kind of a good idea. Like asking people before you contact them for something new or whatever. But I don't know, in this situation, to me, it seems like an extra hoop that you're kind of complicating for the people on your list, in addition to you, like you're kind of experimenting right now. So I'm just kind of curious, like what's your thought right now in terms of all of that?
Yeah. So I think I acquired Bootstrappers in July. It was July or August. And I basically said, you have the rest of this calendar year to kind of experiment, learn about the audience, figure out what their pain points are, what problems they have, and then 2019 is really when it's like, it's time to take all the experimentation you've done and go with your gut or go with whatever evidence you have and double down on something that shows promise or shows traction. So, that's kind of like where my mind is right now. And this is part of that. To be clear, I don't think that the site in its current format is a super compelling value proposition. Like I said before, I think it's just a pretty like RSS reader that somebody else fills in for you, and that somebody else is me, right? Like, so I make sure that you have a stream of good reads that are related to independent entrepreneurship and solopreneurship and bootstrapping. So, to me, like you could replicate that yourself. You could use something like Feedly or Feedbin or whatever, and you could have your own personalized experience without anything else.
So why do it at all? Why keep it around? Like, I know you're doing like the podcast. Why not Bootstrappers.io is the podcast? Or like, I'm curious.
Yeah,
I know you want to like keep building kind of the momentum. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, I think it's more of like, okay, so this site could go a bunch of different ways. And I think this is something that anybody that gets into building products is going to struggle with, right? Like this comes with the territory. It's like, I could go down this path or this path or this path.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know which one's the right one, right? This person's telling me that they want Bootstrappers to turn into Indie Hackers 2.0, right? Like do Indie Hackers, but fix all of the weak points that they have, right? Okay, that sounds nice, but Indie Hackers exists, and so does Hacker News, and so does Designer News. Like these things are everywhere, and then you have Reddit, and so like there's no shortage of places for these folks to hang out online. If what you mean by hang out is just, hey, let me post something, let me get some upvotes, let me get some comments or whatever, and have an open discussion about that. I mean, so like I could take this site that way very easily, but that doesn't energize me, right? Like I think that already exists. So then, but at the same time, like I don't think that I have the deal flow to make Bootstrappers.io a standalone marketplace where bootstrappers like buy and sell their unwanted bootstrap businesses or something like that, you know. And at the same time, like, I don't think it should be, it could be a content site, it could just be a podcast. But again, like, how do you make that? So that would, if it was just a podcast, then it would have to be a creative outlet, because I'm struggling to find a way that you monetize a podcast to make it meaningful. Like, it's not going to replace, like, I'm not going to be able to quit consulting to run a podcast. So people have, it's definitely a potential outcome, but I think that the likelihood,
it's like it's more of an entertainment thing, and you're like a comedian, like, it's people aren't going to give you enough attention for it.
It's not a life-changing amount of money. So, you know, I think
I do have a little, I guess, opinion here about, like, you mentioned the community websites.
Yeah.
So for me, like, the 100% of the attraction, the pull that brings me to those places isn't having a place to hang out. It's not, you know, commenting or hearing people's opinions about my work. 100% of it is I just posted something, or I created some sort of content, and now I want traffic. Like, it's very simple. That's when I go to Indie Hacker, when I type Indie Hackers into the URL, it's like, okay, now I want to promote something.
Yeah.
And for that sort of thing, it is a good tool, I think. And it makes it more, it makes posting there regularly like a sounder strategy, because, you know, to really, take advantage of like a community, you kind of have to participate, right? And you kind of have to build up a credibility. That's what will kind of give you the most bang for your buck there. And now, like, the flip side, like bootstrappers.io currently is just a newsletter. I don't think you have like comments, but that's besides the point. Like, you're doing the kind of the same thing. So, like, you're sending traffic to people, and like these startup directory websites. I don't know if you've seen them. There's a ton of them. Like, if you ever click like how to get my startup listed somewhere, there's a list of like 100 different directories that you can submit.
Like beta list and stuff like that.
Yeah, beta list. Even Product Hunt is a similar thing.
Yeah.
And on those places, you can pay to like have a featured listing most of the time. I don't know what kind of revenue that does, or like if it's compelling nowadays, but like it kind of always comes back to the signal to noise ratio in terms of like the quality level, I think. Beta lists or that sort of site, like if it's constantly just like people paying or like dropping their link and like leaving and like it's all crap, like it's not going to do very well. But I don't know. So I feel like the value, like I feel like getting it mistaken to the point where like if we're thinking that like community is like what people are going there for, I think that's probably a mistake. I think it's most likely the traffic that they want.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting you say that, because, and I think this might be something that folks listening are interested in as well, is that, you know, if you're making a transition from consulting to products, like we all bring our own experience and perspective and frankly biases to what we're doing, what we're building, right? And so like, it's interesting that you say that, because, you know, I go to Indie Hackers and I drop a link in there because I want traffic to my thing, right? But there are thousands of people out there that are quote unquote lurkers that literally just go through and read the comments and never post anything. They never post their own stuff. They never post a comment. They just read and consume everything that's on there, but they're learning from it and they get value from it. And they sit there and maybe they're entrepreneurs and they're just like, hey, I just love, you know, reading the stories of other people, whether they're successes or failures. And that's rewarding for me. And someday I'm going to do that. Right. So that's like one experience. And then you have the people that go and they just live to read the stories of other folks and put in their 2 cents. And they are the first to comment. They put these long detailed things in here. They want that back and forth. So like, I think there are different experiences and different ways that people get value out of platforms. And I think it's important that as somebody who's trying to build a product, that you have your own experience and the way that you envision it, but it's important to listen directly to your audience and hear what they want. Because for all I know, the people, and you know, I have talked with a lot of my subscribers, and this is probably kind of important for you to know, is that what a lot of bootstrappers that I've talked to are struggling with is isolation and loneliness. There is no definitive model for success in the bootstrapping world. Everybody who has been quote unquote successful, that has a sustainable business or whatever, they've had this different winding path to get there, right? There is no like cookie cutter model. And so the only way to set yourself up for success is to tie yourself on to somebody who's already been there, done that, and kind of have them be your coach or your mentor, or at least watch what they do. And that helps you avoid making the same mistakes that they made. And you're still going to make mistakes, but hopefully there's something different and unique, and you're not just repeating history. So, from a platform perspective, I'm less inclined to mirror the Product Hunts, the Indie Hackers, the Beta Lists of the world, and more inclined to almost make it have a public element to it, but have the monetized, like unique selling proposition to be a highly curated, very private, very exclusive kind of mastermind community for bootstrappers that are like serious about connecting with one another and exchanging those lessons learned and supporting one another and things like that. So without getting into too much detail, like that's the way that I'm leaning pretty hard. So in 2019 or earlier, if I feel more strongly about it, I think that's the way I'm going to go. And I think that you'll see that in a couple of other niches as well, as just that I think people are kind of being a little bit more insular. And it sounds terrible to say, but like by making it private and exclusive and frankly making people pay to be in there, that keeps out the riffraff, which is always the struggle with the very public communities like Indie Hackers and Reddit. And, there's a lot of spam in there. There's a lot of people that are just trolling and saying things just to get you fired up as the person who originally posted it or whatever. So that talk about signal to noise ratio, like there is a lot of noise on those platforms right now. And if you just want to focus on doing the work and making progress in your own thing, I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, agreed. And to be clear, I wasn't like suggesting you followed like the beta list model. Like I personally don't really recommend that, I guess. In general, I just feel like on the community side, like you're right that maybe like 1% of the total people there are going for traffic or like to their content, right? And the other, let's say 99%, just to throw out numbers, let's say are lurkers and whatever. I guess the thing that I'm kind of talking about here is that if it feels like the people who get the most value out of these types of sites fall into that 1% of like, and it's a more clear value proposition in a lot of ways, like, get traffic, whatever. So that was kind of the underlying thing there. And then in terms of like the community building and the mastermind, how do you feel about it? Like, do you think that like community building is one of your like strong things? Like for me personally, I think it's a challenge, and like it is like kind of like I feel like if you're gonna go that route, that kind of has to be like your main the thing you kind of get down with, and like the main avenue of like your value creation or your the content creation that you're doing. To me, it seems like it's a very intensive sort of thing to get right, or to like really get the value there, but like some people are able to do it. Like Justin Jackson's a good example. Another example, I don't know if you've seen, is Margot from thatseemsimportant.com. She has a virtual co-working space, and it's expensive. It's like I think maybe $2,000 a year or something like that. But it's like all these solopreneurs that we're experiencing a lot of the same stuff that you were talking about, like the isolation, and it's a place for them to work together virtually and kind of, I think she brings people in and stuff like that. So like there are models where it can work. And it sounds like you've kind of decided to go down that route. So I'm looking forward to see what you kind of come up with.
Well, I don't know if I'd say that. I would say if I had to make a decision today, like if all of my financial stability was pulled out from under me, that's the way I would go. Because one, you can set up that private community tomorrow with some of the tools that exist out there. And two, I think it is something that I'm well equipped to do. I mean, my background is in marketing, public relations, communications, things like that. I am fanatical about like creating conversations and engaging in discourse with people about topics that I'm interested in. I have a pretty good network of, you talk about bringing people in to do like workshops or do something like this where we record a conversation, but it's exclusive for the members of the Bootstrappers community. Like, I have a pretty good network where I could tap into to get those things done. So, I think I have a lot of things going for me, and I'm not 100% sold on the concept yet. But I think, I can envision a world where the website is basically more of a content site. So out of the gate, you would have bootstrappers.io is basically a content site, call it a blog if you want to, authority site, whatever, that has lots of information about how to get your start. Like a lot of the stuff that Justin Jackson, who you mentioned, puts out in his newsletter, right? Like things that bootstrappers or aspiring bootstrappers would want to know and should know about the realities of doing business like solo. But then beyond that, like the next step, the monetized part, is this exclusive community. And I think that, it is hard to make that work and it is high touch, but the point that I want to make with the community is capping the size of it. And so it stays manageable for somebody like me, or maybe me, one team member, to do that community management piece. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept. It's called Dunbar's number. And it's basically a research study that happened where this individual found that as humans, we can only have so many strong personal connections. And the way that they kind of gauged or defined a strong personal connection is like, if you were at a bar with some friends and you bumped into this person, they were like down the bar, let's say, and they said, "Hey, James, come on down, have a drink." And you go down there without any hesitation. Like that's how they define like a person you wouldn't mind having a drink with sporadically that you didn't schedule ahead of time, right? You just bumped into each other and it's fine. But they suggest that this number is capped at like 100 to 150 people, and that's it in your life. That's the maximum amount of meaningful connections that you can have. You just don't have the headspace or the energy to support more than that. And so that's kind of like where I would start with a mastermind community or something like that, and just say membership is capped at this. We charge every single member, so everybody's got some skin in the game. There are certain requirements around. And nothing definitive, but like you have to have a certain level of activity, because the value that everybody else gets out of the community is dependent on you being there and sharing your personal insight, right? So there's some restrictions isn't the right word, but there are some like guardrails that we could set up to make sure that it is a valuable offering. And if that is the core of what bootstrappers.io is, and then there is all the content piece that lives outside of that community is free, like that lets me serve the people I want to serve, which is rewarding for me in its own right. And the monetized part lets me fund the growth of everything else. And then the folks that are in the mastermind community, you can imagine like they get first dibs at like the newsletter and stuff. So you come back around to what we were talking about traffic. It's like, that's another incentive to be in the mastermind community, is like, you can share with me directly stuff that you're working on that's in progress, and I can share with the newsletter and get like a lot of early clicks and feedback and beta testers and whatever. So yeah, I guess that's what I find attractive about it, is like, it would have to be done in the right way. It's not easy, but like you said, there are folks out there that are doing it successfully, and who knows what that looks like financially for them. Yeah. But it's been going for a while, so it's got to be doing pretty well, I would imagine.
I like that a lot. Yeah, all of that. And one idea that popped into my head when you were saying that part was that in the newsletters, the free newsletters, you could have like, you want to send your link in. That's for members or whatever, like to submit a link, like baking that into kind of similar to the idea that we talked about in the last podcast, where you were talking about your podcast and then like having a separate podcast that was like a private one. And we talked about maybe like baking that into the articles that you're sending out. So like whenever you send out a Jordan Gall article, be like, I talked to Jordan and he gave me some pieces of advice here, that's for premium members, or just as an example. Yeah. And I like that a lot, because I think it kind of all bakes back into itself. So I'm excited.
And what I also like about that model, I'll just say one more thing about it, is in a world where the main site is just content, it's articles, it's guides, it's ebooks, whatever, that are all free, right? The whole premise of that is, I want to get you, the new or aspiring bootstrapper, to a point where you feel comfortable joining this mastermind community, right? Because there's going to be money that you pay to be in there. But the people that pay to be a part of mastermind communities are serious about their craft, right? Like there's a certain level of investment that takes place there, and you want to see a return on that investment. So you're incentivized to take your business seriously. And that's what in turn generates a lot of that growth. And I know that you're part of some smaller mastermind groups, and I am as well. And I get a lot out of that. So I guess what I like about the model is like, okay, I'm not I'm not requiring all bootstrappers to pay me to listen to what I have to say or the people that I'm connected with, right? I have this very large, very comprehensive, like free resource out here that says that'll get you from step 0 to step 1, right? But when you're ready to go from step 1 to step 10 or step 100, like when you're really ready to accelerate your business and scale up, then that's what the mastermind community is for. And you're going to have some folks in there that are 5 steps ahead of you and folks in there that are 50 steps ahead of you. And you can learn from all of them, right? And you can bring some new perspective to them as somebody who's very early in their journey, because once you've been bootstrapping, quote unquote, successfully for like 5 years, you don't remember what it's like just starting out, right? And so you start looking, like you're so deep in the weeds of your own product that sometimes it's nice to have somebody who's kind of just getting started or operating in a different industry from you to come in and just tear your stuff apart and say, look, you're totally overlooking this from a user perspective. I mean, that's part of the reason we have these conversations, right? Like just talking with you helps me kind of put my own ideas through the ringer. So that's just another thing that I like about the setup. But again, I'm not 100% invested, but I feel pretty strongly about the value proposition here if it works out right, if I can structure it right.
I recently joined the watercooler.io, which is a kind of a similar thing to what we're talking about now. The experience for me has been I joined for the same exact reason that you're talking about right now, like to learn from people who are at 10 steps ahead of me, 1 step ahead of me, etc. The problem I've run into with it is there's nothing really there for me right now. I could see it like in 10 years when my business has grown and I have employees and stuff like that. But right at this like particular moment, like not much of the content is directly relevant. Mm-hmm. And there's still value there. Like there's still stuff I can read and prepare for the future, for when I do have employees or when I'm, having these other troubles. But communities are tough like that because you need like a huge reservoir of stuff that is going to be relevant to people who are just signing up to like keep them around, right? Like long enough.
Yeah.
And then also the constant like daily stuff so that regular members are getting enough out of it as well. But that's another resource to maybe check out. I did want to mention something about that you said. So you mentioned a couple of times now, like if you had to do this today, or like if you're, if you went into a financial crunch or something where you had to make money, like this is the idea you'd go with. There's the idea of like waiting and like until there is a crunch. Okay, for me, a lot of times I felt like until I'm in kind of that situation, I can't be creative, or I can't like really zero in on the thing that I need. And it's common with like creative problems, creativity. Like South Park, for example, I don't know if you've heard, but like they can't like write shows weeks in advance. It takes them like the deadline of like, oh, our show's on Wednesday and it's Monday. Like, oh crap, that's what kind of helps them make their show or whatever. Like having kind of the deadline is the only way that they've found they can. And it happens with a lot of different creative stuff. And I think product businesses can be like that as well, designing products. But I for myself, I find like I feel like that's dangerous and stressful for me. Like, why do I have to wait until my bank account is getting low where I'm not sure where my mortgage is going to come from before I can like say come up with a good idea to make some money, or like come up with a client or whatever. Like that's kind of been an issue for me in freelancing and even in product businesses. With Workshop and Folio at times, and it's part of the reason I've made like some deliberate decisions recently in my business model to get away from that in a lot of ways. So I'm just kind of curious for you, like, what's the benefit in waiting? I guess until not obviously, I don't think you're waiting until you're in a financial hardship or something, but
yeah.
I guess what's the benefit? I feel like I know part of the answer is going to be, which is like you're gonna be able to like test and learn things, right? like, what's the benefit in waiting before you ask people to pay you for stuff and start building the revenue? Because I feel like it's not going to get easier. It's just going to get like more necessary as like it changes from, yeah, I have this full-time job still, to, oh no, I'm not doing this anymore, and now I need to make some money with this. So I'm curious.
Right. So I think that's the interesting thing about the whole theme of our conversation is like consulting versus product, right? And, I would never advocate, and I'm just a conservative person financially, so I would never advocate that somebody jumps straight into product unless you get laid off and you don't have a choice, right? But I would taper things off, right? But the nice thing is, if you were employable at one point, you're always employable again, right? In a consulting setup or a traditional employment role. So like, to your point, that can lead us to be kind of fat and happy and complacent though, right? Like we always have this consulting income coming in. So if the product doesn't take off right away, that's okay, right? So I think that early on, my hesitation to ask people for money for anything or just dive straight into building a product that I can sell to the Bootstrappers audience was, I just took over, and I don't want to be the guy that buys a site and immediately starts like selling, right? Because to my knowledge, the site has never really sold much of anything. It's just kind of been like a resource, an educational resource, or whatever you want to call it. So I didn't want to immediately pivot from that to kind of like this, just like a shill or whatever, so.
But I don't think you would do that. Like, you're not a shill.
No.
You're not like going to sell snake oil or anything. Like, you're going to sell something of value.
Yeah. So, I think that, it's interesting that you mentioned that the creativity that happens when you put in constraints, whether you elect to put them in or they happen to you, right? I just finished a book by a guy named Ryan Serhant, and the book's called Sell It Like Serhant. He's actually a real estate salesperson, but he had this really interesting model, which is like, you have to have your why, which I think everybody's familiar with. That's like the Simon Sinek thing. Like, why do you even do what you do? You have to have your work, like meaning what work can you do and only you do that's meaningful. And then what I'm getting to here is this concept that he had called the wall. Like, what is your wall? What is the thing that your back is up to and you never want to revisit again, right? Like, what are you running away from? You don't want your back against the wall. And I think that's a little bit of what you're talking about when you get laid off or something happens and you're broke, or you're going to be broke very soon. Your back is against the wall, and it's instinctual for us to like do everything we can to figure it out. And a lot of times that's when we do our best work. So in the absence of something like that being thrust upon you, you kind of have to come up with your own constraints, right? And one thing that I've been entertaining is November, which is right around the corner, is National Novel Writing Month, right? NaNoWriMo or whatever. And usually it's for like fiction novels. That's not really my thing, but I've always wanted to write like a tiny little book of some kind, like a handbook. I know you have one that's is it Emails That Win Clients, I think is the name. So you've done that, right? But I've always wanted to do that, and I've just never, like, I've had the same kind of like, call it imposter syndrome or whatever. I've just like, but what if I write this book and nobody wants it, right? Like, what if it addresses a problem that nobody wants? And so to the point about constraints, like, I'm thinking in November, I'm just going to do NaNoWriMo, but forget about fiction. I'm writing nonfiction. I'm going to write some kind of book that appeals to the Bootstrappers audience and just get it out there, right? Like, I have this one inside of me that I'm just calling Sales for Founders. Like, those are some constraints that you can self-impose that I think can be super effective if that's something that motivates you. And one way that I've seen this done successfully is Matt Giovanisi. He runs moneylab.co, and he does these little sprints. Like, he tries to build an entire course in a week, and he'll just work 24 hours a day for a week to get this course out about, I think he did Asana for bloggers or SEO for bloggers or something like that. So, to the point about constraints, I think that they're super beneficial. And part of the reason why I've been hesitant to monetize Bootstrappers or to dive into any particular product is because I don't have that wall right now. Like, I am very comfortable. Like, I have this consulting income that is an indefinite, it's not even a time sensitive contract, right? Like, this contract doesn't end at the end of the year. It's just open-ended, right? It's basically an employment situation that's, not quite full-time. And so that's something that, much like you, I'm struggling to challenge myself to just dive in because I don't have that urgency. And I'm not sure where I'm going to find that from. Like I said, I'm considering like November and NaNoWriMo as like, just get something out there. Even if it's a $20 ebook, like, just get something out there and say, hey, I made this for you. I think it can solve a lot of the problems that you have. If you're interested, like, here's where you can purchase it. So maybe that'll be my first baby step, but there really is nothing to hold me back from standing up that mastermind community tomorrow, seeding it with maybe 15 to 20 folks that I know personally, just letting them in for free and just kind of engaging in that for like 30 days and saying, are you guys getting value out of this? Like, do you want this thing to keep going? Can I open it up to like another 80 or 90 paid members and just running with it from there?
Yeah.
It's hard though. I mean, it's part of the territory again. Like we've said that a couple times this episode, but it's like the internal struggle. And that's part of the reason why I think a community like this has to exist, right? Like imagine having a conversation like this, but instead of just getting your opinion, I hear the same thing from 12 more people and they're all saying, just suck it up, man. Just ask for the money or whatever. Like, do you know what that would do to me? I mean, not that you're not motivational, but you know, imagine if you had like a crowd of people saying like, just do it. You're going to drive yourself crazy by always trying to find the right answer. There is no right answer. Like put something out there and learn from it. And even if you sell 0 copies, like you'll have this experience, right? And you'll be better off for it.
Yeah. And so, I like all that a lot. And I agree. One of the examples, an example for me of something that I've done that built in kind of the constraint without, and it's like high stakes enough for me to have to act on it, but that's not tied to like me being in financial ruin for it to happen. As an example, is the emails that I send out for paying customers get sent out at 11 automatically for workshop. At 11 a.m. Pacific Coast time. So if there's a lead that hasn't been sent out, a project that hasn't been sent out at 11, it'll send it out and it'll send that email out. So I like to send out like 10 projects a day. And if I haven't found 10 or 5 or whatever it is for the day, they're going to get an email that has like one project in it, or 0 or actually, it wouldn't send as if it's 0. It would just not.
That was what I was going to ask. Yeah, it'd be really cool if it sent the 0 one out. And it just says you're done.
Fire Robert. It should say. Yeah. And so, like, that's high stakes enough for me to have. Like, I have to act on that, and even if it's 3 or 4 or 5, like I have to find those projects. And so with Folio, it's kind of the same thing. Like, it sends from the same kind of source. But I do it a little bit differently. But anyways, that was kind of an example for me that I thought too. And I was like, you know, it's not tied to a financial crunch. Well, it is in a way, but it's not like me not doing that only, like it only happens if I am in dire straits or something, right?
Yeah. You know, I've seen that done in a couple of similar but slightly different models. Like I've seen it done inside of Slack groups where everybody says like, hey, this is an accountability challenge. Like I've seen it done in a Slack group that's mainly about freelancers and agencies. And they said, hey, you know, I'm sick of being in this feast or famine cycle. I'm going to commit to reaching out to 10 new sales leads every single day somehow. Right. And so what they did was if anybody who did not check in and take a screenshot of the 10 emails or whatever, they had to pay everybody else $10. And so if 50 people participate, like you're putting out $500 every time that you don't do, like talk about motivation and having your back against the wall. Like I'd be doing that every single day. I've seen similar things done. I think there's a mobile app where like you and your friends can all join. And if you don't check in at Gold's Gym every day or whatever, then you automatically send them $10 from your Venmo and you're paying all your friends, right? So your friends can make $100 for going if nobody else went that day. So yeah, it's interesting that you can definitely self-impose some meaningful, I guess, fires to spray along.
Another one for you that might help is like live streams or like scheduling live events. If you're writing this book and you need some ideas on certain topic, sales for, I think you said consultants or
sales for founders is kind of what I'm leaving out. So basically like the solo founder that's really good at building product or whatever, but isn't comfortable like in a sales conversation. That's what I want to educate them on.
So like maybe a chapter in there, you're not even having trouble writing, but like you just want to brainstorm some ideas, like create a live stream that you're going to send out to your newsletter as a bonus. It'll once that date is in the calendar, it's like, that you're going to know it's coming up. You're going to, it's going to be like suddenly, I feel like things where like there's a hard date and it's like very, and there's other people involved is sort of what it ends up having to be like the charging $500 to not send the leads. Like that's an awesome idea. I don't know. Like I feel like I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna log out and nobody's gonna know. Like,
yeah,
I'm out. Like unless they have my credit card like on them.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the mobile app example I shared. Is like it's tied to your Venmo or your PayPal, so it'll just pull $10 out of your account. Like, and if you don't go to the gym, and you have to use the location services on your device to physically check in at the gym. You can't just say, "Yep, I did that. I was totally there." Like it can tell when you're there. I don't know how it handles like if you go to a couple of different locations or whatever. But anyways, like the point is, that's super motivational to me. Even if it's just $10, like it's funny how. Somebody can make 6 figures a year, but $10 is still very important to them, especially when it's about like, I'm paying this just because I didn't go to the gym, and I get nothing out of it.
Yeah.
But the live streaming idea is super interesting. Like I'm seeing a big trend of people working in public. And I have it on the whiteboard next to me here is like work in public and start doing some like website copy and things like that, just out there because, I think that and if anybody's never seen it, I've stumbled across a site the other day. It's called Shipstreams, like a cruise ship and then live streaming. So shipstreams.com. And it's basically just a directory of people that are doing this kind of stuff. And then at the very top, it usually has, an embedded Twitch or YouTube widget of somebody who's live right now. So I think that's super motivational just to see other people. And a lot of it is about code. So if that's your thing, like you've got developers on there and they're working on their software product or whatever, I don't know that I could write in public just because my writing process, like I just sit there in silence for a little bit and think a lot of the time, but I could definitely take like some existing website copy that I have and tear it apart and talk about like my thought process and why, this particular benefit is not super clear to me. And I could say this better and then just look at the chat and, get feedback from folks. Like, I think that's super motivational. And to your point, like, I don't think you can just say, I'm going to do this. Like if you put it on your calendar, that's one thing, but I think you got to take it to the next level. Like you said, that email that you have goes out if it has 1 lead in it or 10, right? And it's going out automatically. If there's a way to do that with these live streams, like you schedule an email in ConvertKit or whatever, and it says, I'm going live in 3 hours, right? And that has already been sent out with the YouTube link in it. Like you're going to do that thing, right? Unless your house is on fire or something crazy happened, like you're going to follow through.
Be careful though, because that's how I did the snafu on the live stream.
Well, yeah, I highly recommend testing all of your. It's easier if it's just you. Like if it's just you and you're going to be a talking head and you're going to share your screen, like that's so much easier. But if you're trying to have a back and forth like this with a guest, it gets complex.
Yeah, even for writing, there's a good example of it, of kind of the working in public thing. It's by Jason Fried. He posted a YouTube video. I don't know if you saw it, where he just wrote an article like live and kind of broke it down. And like, it's one of those, they have like a Getting Real channel or something where they've been posting stuff.
Yeah.
And to me, that's been like the most valuable one of that series of videos that they've done. And to tie that back to something, I just read the book, their new book,
It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And a lot of it is for like a larger company, kind of their MO, like it doesn't have to be crazy at work. You don't have to make your employees suck or whatever. But the first, for me, it was worth it just based off the first chapter alone, or I don't know, section alone. There's like, I think 4 or 5 chapters in that essay, and they're super short. I mean, in that section, and they're super short, but they're all about like, I guess, kind of questioning like the stuff that you're thinking about. And so like the main takeaway for me so far has been like the question isn't always like, what am I going to work on today? Or like which of these 2 things should I do? Or like what's the most effective use of my time? I feel like the main takeaway is there's no is an option too. Like nothing is an option. Like sometimes not doing anything is just the best option overall, or at least like an equally good option to doing something that doesn't work, or that, so like rethinking kind of how you have to structure and create stress for yourself has like been extremely helpful for me. Psychologically, like knowing yeah, I can just hang out with my wife all day. Nothing's gonna like that is not a big deal. Like, um, oftentimes we give ourselves all this work and a lot of stress about like I have to create an awesome product on, make it better or make this more money. But like at the end of the day, 90% of the stuff we do has like almost no effect on what we're trying to accomplish. It's like this small, tiny sliver of like the work that we do that ends up having like an effect, and like that effective stuff doesn't take that much time. So why stress out about like all this other stuff? Like no is an option too. Like say no to as much as you can get away with, and you're going to be like you're going to live with so much less stress. And yeah, like so much I feel like of what I've thought was like a requirement in my business is not. It's just not like a requirement. Having an email list, that's like a requirement, right? Everybody has to have an email list if you have a business. But there's plenty of examples of people who don't have email lists that are doing just fine. Like kind of rethinking that kind of the requirements, I guess, for yourself.
Yeah, and there are so many people who, like, they say you should have an email list, but 90% of people start with nothing, right? Like I'm not in that case because I bought a list that came with bootstrappers.io, but a lot of folks, like Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income, started with zero, literally zero. And now he has a massive email list, So like saying that that's a prerequisite for success is not 100% true in most cases.
And even if it is true, or even if it is like mostly true, and like it's like the greatest thing you can do is have an email list for your business. If it's the most effective thing, like even if that's true, you don't have to do it still. Like you can find another way, or you can do the less effective way if it's easier for you or better for your, so much of like advice nowadays is so one or the other, and it's just not true. It seems like in real life, there's like so much, like Justin Jackson calls it like texture. So like the advice that you're getting from so many people, like that they make seem as absolutely necessary, is just not. So
yeah, and I think that what I'm hearing and what you're saying there is elements from a lot of popular books that I've read in the past, like Essentialism, which is basically just like focus on the things that matter most and literally say no to everything else because they're just detractors from your energy and your momentum. James Clear, in his new book, Atomic Habits, and in some of the writing that he has on his website, he talks about the benefits of getting just 1% better every day. I think a lot of times we fall into the trap of like, I have to solve this right now for my business, or it's going to wilt away and die. If you just get 1% better every day, by the end of the year, you're 365% better theoretically, right? So like small actions add up to big results when they're done consistently over time and you're intentional about it. So, I heard those bits in there, which I love. One thing that I would share with anybody listening that has really helped me, and I learned this from my days of being like a stuffy suit and tie consultant. My boss always said that you should have a weekly definition of victory. We called it a DOV, right? And if you get five things or less done this week, it's a victory. It doesn't matter if you get them done on Monday or if it takes you all week, right? But if you can just get 5 or less things done that are critically important to getting to the next step, not to the finish line, to the next step of where you want to be in your business, then this whole week will be a success. And so what I started doing is every Sunday, I write down my DOV for the week, and then I put time on my calendar for those specific things. And I just kind of like use the texture of my life, to steal your term, to say, do I want to do all these things between now and Wednesday and be done with it? Or do I want to do these things and kind of spread them out over Friday and take breaks in between and go to the gym in the middle of the day, or whatever? I got to go to an appointment, or I got to pick my daughter up from school, whatever. But yeah, my biggest life hack, if that's what you want to call it, is I do my planning on Sunday night, because I'm not doing anything else other than watching football anyway. So I can sit there on the computer and just kind of punch out a to-do list of 5 items and put time on the calendar for that. And just know that when I sit down at my desk on Monday morning, I don't have to think about what to do. I decided that, like past James decided that for me, and I can just dig in and start working on it. And if you're not doing that, I strongly encourage you to test that out for at least, usually these behavior changes take like 2 to 3 weeks for you to really set it. Like the first week, it's going to be painful. You're going to hate it. You're going to say, this is terrible. And then by that second or third week, you're starting to realize if this is really going to work for you or not, but you have to give it a fair shake. And if you can do it for 2 to 3 weeks, even a month, then I think you'll be able to figure out if it's going to be a good fit for you. But it's worked really well for me.